I'm going to be making a batch of strawberry jam. I've got a nice big bowl of strawberries here, and these are all from the last 3 days, maybe 4 days, so we are definitely in the middle of strawberry season right now, and we are getting lots of strawberries, and jam is just going to be a really good way to preserve all of this. So I'm not quite sure how many cups of strawberries I have here. The recipe I'm using says that I should start with about 12 cups of strawberries, but we do have to take all the tops off and then crush them, and what we're looking for is 6 cups of crushed strawberries. So I'm gonna get started prepping all of these. We just have to take the tops off. And this year we have had a lot of trouble with critters getting to our strawberries, whether it be slugs, roly-polies, birds, or squirrels. I feel like we've just had a little bit of everything. So even though this is a big bowl, I do have to go through and kind of find any strawberries that have been nibbled on and just cut those parts out. So hopefully after I take all of the yucky parts out, we'll have the 6 cups crushed that we need. If not, then I can go outside and probably grab a few more from the garden. But let's hope for the best. I'm just gonna cut all the tops off, and then to crush them, I'm going to be pureeing them in my food processor. So I usually just cut the tops off of my strawberries with a paring knife. I know that you can hull the strawberries and take out the middle, but I usually don't mind if that's still there. So I'll just cut the tops off, and then some of these, since we have like little nibbles on them, I'll have to cut off more of the strawberries. I'm not really sure why this year we've just had so many more things trying to get to our strawberries. Last year we hardly had any trouble with anything eating our strawberries. I mean, we did have slugs here and there, but none of the birds or squirrels really bothered them, so we were really lucky last year. But this year, not so much. So some of the areas of our garden we have covered with netting or some other barrier just to keep some of the critters out, and that does help a little bit. And then I've also just started picking our strawberries just a little bit earlier. So here's a really nice like super red one, but a lot of these I've been picking a little bit under, like this one, which is actually fine for jam. You don't need like the sweetest fruit for making jam because you are adding a lot of sugar, and actually unripe fruit has a lot more pectin than ripe fruit usually, so it actually does help to make a better jam. So it's not a huge deal that I had to pick some of these a little bit early. It's just a bummer when you go out there and see like a perfectly good strawberry that is close to being picked one day, and then the next day half of it is just eaten and it's unusable. But luckily this year we do have chickens, so I just give any of the gross strawberries to them, and all of these tops I'm going to keep for them as well, and they absolutely love them, so it's a nice treat for them. And look at this crazy strawberry that I picked out there. It is like a complete circle basically. It must have been a fused blossom, but like 4 or 5 fused blossoms. It just looks crazy. Really cool. I feel like sometimes we get one strawberry plant that just creates a lot of really big weird fruit like this. So this plant had like 3 different fruit. Not all of them were this crazy, but they just had a lot of fused blossoms, so we got all of these like monster weirdo strawberries. So it's kind of fun to see that in the garden because you definitely don't get strawberries like that in the store. Making strawberry jam is always a really fun time of the year because I feel like it's like the first thing that I do where I'm canning something from the garden. I know that canning is not just like a spring and summer thing. Some people can year round, but for me, I mostly just do it seasonally to preserve whatever is growing at the time. So for me, I mostly just preserve during those times when things are growing. And strawberries are one of the first fruits that are ripe. And I also think it's one of the easiest fruits to grow. We definitely are not experts in growing fruits. Most of our fruit trees have issues with them. This year, our peach tree, again, we're losing most of the peaches to some bugs that hopefully we can get under control next year. And we have apple trees that also have issues. But strawberries seem to do pretty well, even if you don't have a lot of experience and you're just learning. they also multiply really quickly. So this year we have 3 different areas of our garden where we have strawberry plants, where last year we only had one area. We just had those 2 beds in front of our greenhouse, and we still got a ton of strawberries off of those last year. I made a batch of strawberry jam, and I also froze a ton of strawberries, and we got a lot of strawberries out of that one patch. And those strawberry plants did put out runners in the summer and fall last year, so I dug up those runners and transplanted them to other parts of our garden. So now we have strawberries by our asparagus bed. We also have them around our blueberry bushes in a raised bed. So between all of these different areas, even though some of our strawberries have gotten eaten by animals and bugs, we're still getting a lot every day. I think we're just now hitting the peak where we're getting about a quart of strawberries a day. So it's a nice thing to start with, and then year after year you can just keep taking those runners and just adding them in more areas of your garden without having to buy new plants every year. Jam is also a really great thing to start canning if you're a beginner. I think jam is probably the second thing I learned to can. The first thing was pickles, which are also super easy. For today's jam, I am using store-bought pectin, which pretty much ensures that your jam is going to set up well as long as you use the correct amount of sugar that it tells you to. It is possible to make jam without pectin. Last year I made peach jam without pectin. I was trying that out for the first time. But if you're not using pectin, I think you need to use a little bit more sugar, and you also need to cook the fruit a little bit longer because you basically have to cook out a lot of the moisture in the fruit, which means you have to boil it for longer. So I found that with my peach jam, where I didn't use store-bought pectin, it didn't have as much of a fresh peach flavor as I was hoping for. It still tasted really good, but I feel like it tasted kind of more like honey than like peaches. So I think I will be sticking to using powdered pectin packets for the jam that I'm making this year. I also really like making a lot of different kinds of fruit jams throughout the year, because even though we don't eat a ton of jam, because I mean even homemade jam, there's still quite a bit of sugar in it, and we just try not to have too much sugar all the time. But even if we don't eat all of it ourselves, I do really like to give jam as presents. They're great for Christmas presents, or also like if we go to visit a friend, we can bring a jam or two to their house, and everybody loves homemade jam. I feel like you can't really go wrong with that as a present. So it's really nice to just make these throughout the year, and you can just have these little jars ready to grab a few anytime you need it without having to like go out and rush to buy presents. And of course, homemade gifts are always extra special. So that's actually where most of the jam that I make throughout the year ends up, with other people. So I've got my finished bowl of prepared strawberries here, and this is the bowl of tops and rejects that are going to go to the chickens. So I have to go ahead and crush these now. Hopefully we have the 6 cups that we need. And here is the pectin that I'm going to be using. I like to use the low sugar pectin, and I just follow the directions on the sheet that comes with the pectin. It just tells you how much fruit and how much sugar to put, and if you need anything else like lemon juice. So for this batch, I'm going to need 4 cups of sugar, which I have in this bowl here. And I just need to separate out a 1/4 cup of the sugar with my packet of pectin. But before I do that, I'm gonna prep my pot for my water bath canning. Get it started on the stove because that water is gonna take a little bit to heat up. Here is a look at the jam directions that came with the pectin. And for strawberry jam, 6 cups crushed strawberries and 4 cups sugar. And by the way, when you are making jam with pectin like this, you need to make sure that you use the exact amount of sugar that they call for. A lot of times when I'm baking or things like that, I will reduce the amount of sugar, but for something like canning or jam making, I just follow the recipe, because if you don't, it can either be not safe to eat or it won't set up properly. So even though this is the less sugar option, it's still quite a bit of sugar, but you really do need it all. So there's my 1/4 cup of sugar, and then I'm going to add the packet of pectin, because you need to add the pectin and this sugar before you add the total 4 cups of sugar. So I'm gonna start pureeing my strawberries in my food processor. I'm gonna have to do this in a few batches. So I'm gonna pour this into my measuring cup as I go along. I think we're gonna be good, because that's already 4 cups in here. I'm going to go ahead and add this to my saucepan, just because I don't have enough space in this measuring cup for now. And we should be able to get the last 2 cups from what I have left here. So that's perfect. I'm a little bit short. I think I'm gonna go outside and see what other strawberries I can scrounge up to get it to the 2 cup line, because right now I'm at like 1.5 cups. So I think if I just go out and grab a few strawberries, that'll be good. I think this is perfect. I was able to pick a few more strawberries from what ripened this afternoon, so I think that will be a good addition. So right now I had just the strawberries in my pot, and I had kind of confused myself from the instructions, and I thought that this had to be boiling before I added that bowl of pectin and the 1/4 cup of sugar, but I think I actually had it wrong. I think that's actually supposed to go in right now with those strawberries. Everything still turned out okay, it's still set properly, but I think that the proper way to do it is to put it in right now. While that's going and boiling, I'm just gonna clean up my area a little bit, and I also want to mention that I already have my jars sanitized. I ran them earlier in my dishwasher, which is my favorite way to sanitize, because every time I try and boil our jars in the pot that I'm going to be doing my canning in, which is what a lot of places say to do, my jars always come out dirtier than before because we have really hard water and we end up with like that hard water white coating on the outside. So I just like to sanitize them in the dishwasher, and they're sitting in there right now. It has just been run, so everything is still warm, because you want to put your jam into warm jars. I'm also going to run out and drop off these strawberry trimmings to the chickens. Look how excited they are. They just like to wait in that corner anytime we come out of our door, because they just know that we have treats for them. Oh my gosh, the strawberries ended up all on that chicken. Oh, it's okay, the rest of them will clean it off for her. They're so excited for treats, they always go right where I'm about to throw the food, so food always ends up on their backs. When the mixture is getting close to boiling, I like to stand around and stir this constantly so that it doesn't scorch on the bottom. and I usually just use this time to catch up on Instagram while I'm doing this. So I've been just standing here letting this come to a boil, and it is almost at a rolling boil, but it is starting to get a little foamy. And in the recipe it says that you can add a half teaspoon of butter to reduce the foaming, so I'm going to do that. So just the tiniest little pat of butter. I've never done this before, but last year we did have a slight amount of foam, so I'm going to try it out this year. So I think it just needs a little bit longer. It is kind of boiling, but you want it to be a rolling boil so that it does not stop bubbling after you stir it. I think we're almost there. So I think we're good now. It is boiling, and when I stir it, it's still boiling immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and add my first bowl with the pectin and the 1/4 cup of sugar. So we need to mix this in and let it come to a boil again before we add the rest of the sugar. Once the rest of the sugar is added in, it needs to boil for 1 minute, and then we are ready to ladle into our jars. So now that we're almost there, I'm going to grab my jars out of the dishwasher and get that all set up. Okay, so I think we are good to go. We can start ladling into our jars now. I'm using 1/2 pint jars, and I think this recipe will probably fill 7 or 8 of them. I prepared 8 just in case. I've filled all of my jars and left a 1/4 inch of headspace, and I'm going around the rim of each of these with a rag that has a little bit of white vinegar on it. This is just going to wipe away any of the jam that gets on that very top part of the rim, because any food that's left on there can interfere with the sealing of your lid, so you want to make sure it's really nice and clean. And then I'm going to pop a fresh new lid on top of each of these. I've just warmed these up in some hot water, but I think these days that's not really necessary. I just think it helps to kind of soften up the seal a little bit. And then I'll place a ring on top and just tighten it fingertip tight, so you're not trying to get like a super tight seal, because you actually do want to allow for some air to pass out of the jars when they go into the boiling water. And then I'm going to place them in my water bath for 10 minutes for these 1/2 pints. I just use a normal large pot for my water bath canning, and I do have like a rack that holds all of the jars in place. I know that you can buy like a specific water bath canner, but that's not really necessary. You can just use any large pot that fits your jars. And you also want to have them covered with water by about 1 inch. And you start your 10-minute timer once the water comes up to a boil, not once you put the jars in the water. So I ended up with 8 1/2 pints that I am water bath canning. I also have this quarter pint that I'm not going to process just because it's so small. I'm just going to keep this in the fridge and we'll just eat it for the next month or so. And I also have a bunch that's just like on the sides of this pot. So I toasted up some sourdough and we are going to scrape up the rest of this jam and give it a little taste test. Whatever is left in the pot has already firmed up quite a bit, so I'm sure that this is going to set up really nicely. So it's the next day now, and I have let all of these jars sit for 24 hours, and it looks like all of them sealed. So I just checked to make sure the top, this little part, is pressed in. If it's popping up, then it's probably not sealed, but all of these look good. And you can do another check by just grabbing it by the lid without the ring on, and it should be able to lift up. That's how you know you have a good seal. So we've been eating this already for the past day with the batch that I put in the fridge, and it is so good. I think it's better than last year because I picked the strawberries a little underripe. It gives it a little bit of tartness, which is nice to have when you have so much sugar. So I actually really like using a little bit underripe fruit, it turns out. So that's pretty cool, and you can see how it has set up really nicely, nice and thick. So yeah, I'm really happy with this, and it is our first preservation canning project in the books for 2022. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.